Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 2 of the Beer Enthusiasts. My name is Scott Fielder. This is my fellow advanced cicerone, Chris Crow, and we have an interesting one. A brewery that I have a very fun sort of history with. This is the first brewery that I ever waited in line for a beer, and it was a really, really long line. But this is a beer called Shadow Pop from Monkish Brewing Company, and they've got 2 locations now. That was a big thing. I was listening to an old podcast trying to see if I could get any information on like recipe stuff, and one of the things they said back then was the expansion was not part of the plan, but that has changed, right? Because now there's a location that's a little bit closer, at least to you. There's one in Anaheim now, which has been good for everybody. So
Yeah, and well, first of all, remember lines for beer.
yeah, another Dark Lord day.
Yeah, it just seems like so long ago, yet also just the other day. So, what do we
Right,
know? But we were talking about we haven't really focused on in our little shows with these beers, Hazy IPA all that much.
right.
And it was like in our area,
Yeah.
why not just go for the gold, go for the hype, and get what is one of the latest Monkish releases, and it'll give us
Yeah.
plenty to talk about, which is super fun.
Yeah, exactly. So Shadow Pop double dry hopped Hazy IPA. It's got Nelson Sauvin, Motueka, and then a little bit of Simcoe, and then it also uses something called Phantasm powder, which we'll get into. What do you have for your glassware? I've got hashtag Monkish Monday.
Oh, nice! I've got like their gold
Oh,
foil
that one's
ghost glass. Yeah,
yep. That one is
so
awesome.
it's one of the
That
rare
one is
times I have proper
definitely.
glassware.
Yeah. So, and as usual, their beers, they just pour so pale, and even though it is quite hazy, um, it still doesn't look overtly like turbid. I'm not really sure how that is, but it doesn't look
Yeah,
milky. I guess is what I'm getting at. It's sort of like not this like chunky. There's not any floaters in there. That was kind of the original thought around hazy IPA, is that this is just like a rushed beer, because filtration and chill haze and takes time, and so it was like, oh, they're just leaving all the yeast in there, and they're not using fining agents to get out all the proteins, and they're leaving all the polyphenols and stuff. But interestingly enough, listening to a lot about how Monkish does things, it's almost the opposite of that. And I think some of the consumers slowly figured that out at the beginning because they were trying these really fresh. And I know you have, opinions on how long, you kind of maybe even wait to drink some of these things, because that was kind of our plan with this one, right?
yeah, and you just get used to certain producers of hazy IPA, right, to suit your own tastes. I think
Absolutely.
some breweries release it kind of so-called ready to drink, which is nice. Some, they might taste a little green to you out of the gate, or have like a not green as in like the beer itself is too young, like it has off flavor problems, but more like um, kind of like the brightest and most astringent aspects of some of the hops that were used in there maybe haven't kind of like cooled off a little bit. And so for me, a lot of times I like to, especially a big old hazy IPA like this, I like to wait a couple of weeks, which sounds counterintuitive to some, because it's like only fresh IPA, as fresh as you could possibly
Right.
get it. But particularly with hazy IPA, and this is something I've heard some other beer folks talk about, um, with West Coast IPA, when that hop character fades, there's not a lot of fermentation character to fall back on. But hazy IPA, they're using like yeast profiles that are quite fruity in and of themselves. So it changes the flavor characteristics and the aroma characteristics, but it doesn't smell stale after a few weeks. It's just like a different set of fruity aromas.
Yeah, that was definitely something that once hazy got big, a lot of people were wondering who says maybe that they're using Chico or whatever, but they're really maybe just like, maybe it's like a little thread of Weizen yeast in there. Like, where are they getting this fruity pebble banana bubblegum thing?
Right.
Where is that? How are they achieving that? And I think somebody even actually went as far as to try and uh, capture some treehouse yeast from some sort of bottle, and
Mm.
and then supposedly they found out that they do kind of do like a co-pitch, and part of it is Weizen yeast. But the big thing for this one that's going to be driving a lot of the fruit character is the use of this relatively new sort of advanced brewing product. It's not really a hop product because it's not it's Phantasm powder. It's made from Marlborough New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc grape skins that have been dried, and they're incredibly rich in things called thiol precursors. And interestingly, precursor has always been a weird word for it because there's basically thiols can be in their bound form, which is the precursor form. So it's still just a thiol. It's just attached to something else that's weighing it down. And then if there's a yeast strain that's able to kind of cleave that and break that linkage, then thiols become extremely volatile and are perceivable at extremely low thresholds. I think a lot of people are hearing the sort of imagery of thiols being like the human, like you can detect a thiol, like you could detect like the head of a pin in an Olympic-sized pool. And for every single, for the lower the threshold gets, the more individual pools that get added on, and you can, it's like if it's 1 part per billion, it's 1 Olympic-sized pool, 2 parts per billion, it's 2, but it's still just that one little pinhead, and so they become extremely volatile. And so what the Phantasm powder does is it gives all of these, these thiol precursor rich grape skins, and then obviously a lot of these hop varietals, especially Nelson Sauvin and Simcoe, are very well known for having tons of thiol precursors. As well, so that's why they're very they're very expressive, and especially when used with, again, these these sorts of yeast strains that people are trying to find that are able to do this, because it's not a lot of them. It's not a lot, especially beer yeast strains. It's a little bit more common with wine strains, and so there's again been kind of like some co-pitching and trying to figure out how we can how we can do that. And now there's stylized yeast, where now there's this this genetically modified yeast where they are basically putting in that gene, or coded, then all of a sudden that strain is can encode for the gene. I want to say, I'm pretty sure the enzyme, it's I think beta lyase is one of them, and I think the other one is I think it's beta glucosidase, I think, is the other enzyme that can kind of cleave that linkage. But it's great. But those thiols really release a lot of what I'm smelling in the beer. So let's go through kind of what we're smelling. I know we're going to kind of skip to the sensory, but I think it relates so much to the to this these thiol precursors that let's do that first, and then I'll kind of dig into the recipe. I know we'll go a little bit out of order here,
Yeah,
but
and I think part of what we'll find is, you see thiols being explained as, or these products explained as thiol boosting, and
right,
so there are thiols in hops already, in malt. It's basically
right,
a widely found sulfur product compound, and so thinking it as boosting, I think ties in with what I'm smelling in the aroma, which is, the first thing is, a lot of hazy IPA you can get obviously pineapple aromas, and I get that here, but it's like pineapple on crack. You know what I mean? It is like
yeah.
huge, like, sting the tongue, tart pineapple. I get that like gooseberry thing that people
I
get
was
out of
gonna say,
Nelson quite a
I
bit.
know. I was gonna say gooseberry as well. Sometimes it's kind of green or white wine grapes. Sometimes it's gooseberry. Sometimes it's also from thiols. I sometimes get like really like just overripe melon. And that's something that people
Yeah.
started to run into, as they thought, well, like if thiols are what we want, then let's just do thiols. But then we forget that a lot of thiols are sulfur compounds, and some of them are not don't smell that great to everyone. 4-MMP is another one that Simcoe specifically is highly rich in. And I know us in our recent off flavor training that we're doing, we've been studying 4-MMP, and it smells very berry like. But to some people, it smells a little catty, which is not going to be very appealing.
Yeah, and that's true of a lot of like these kind of like thiol characters in certain concentrations, where someone's 4-MMP is black currant, it's
Right.
cat urine to someone else, where someone's is like passion fruit, which I get a little bit of
Uh-huh.
that kind of passion
Me
fruit
too.
aroma in this. If that character is super duper high, it can almost come across as like Sharpie marker,
Yeah.
just like a big kind of a assault on the senses. And so I would definitely say that, I don't know which ones I'm sensitive to or not, but this is like a bunch of overripe tropical fruit to me for the most part. And then I think what that's I'm not very good at picking out each hop necessarily, but what I think kind of Simcoe is bringing back into the fold is this doesn't completely shed all of the like grapefruit character of
Hmm.
a
Totally
little bit
agree.
older school IPA. You know, there's a lot of tropical aroma, but there's still some kind of like white grapefruit thing going on.
Yeah. White grapefruit. I always get a little bit of apricot, kind of apricot pith on the palate from Simcoe, and I'm getting that here. Kind of that very old school. Again, your gets a little more pithy on the palate, a little more, um, uh, little bit more, a little touch of grassiness still.
Yeah, a little bit.
But
It's
but
not
this is ready
super
to smooth
grassy.
out. Yeah, this is ready to smooth out real quick. This is pretty close to like prime to like I would think maybe in a couple more weeks this is just going to be tasting really really smooth.
Well, and I would say for what's the ABV on this one? Because we're in double IPA territory, right?
Yeah,
This
yeah. I think
is
it's I want to say it's 8 on the dot.
8
8.6.
8.6. And for it being that high in alcohol, it that's carrying a ton of flavor and aroma, but
Oh.
it's kind of finishing pretty dry to me.
Yeah.
Some big hazies can be, um, have that kind of almost like vanilla creamy undertone, and this doesn't really have that. It kind of all washes away. It's almost like you have a little bit of like citrus zest bitterness, just kind of like hanging out a little bit. I wouldn't call it bone dry, obviously,
No.
but it's surprisingly not sweet finishing,
Yeah,
which is interesting.
to me this is sort of the epitome of where we are at in the pendulum of IPA. For the longest time it was just like what is like the most tongue-scrapingly bitter like beer that we can make, and then it was like we want sweet, we want tropical, we want full mouthfeel, like residual sugar, and now people are like, actually, we can just make it like this one is. It's a little bit medium full, slightly pillowy on the tongue, but then like you said, it just dries out on the back end. There's a little alcohol warmth in there too that kind of helps with that. There's a little bit of bitterness, and so I think we've kind of the pendulum is kind of swung like this, and now it's kind of like meeting in the middle a little bit because some people there is so much variance to this style because there are so many hops, there's so many hop combinations as we'll get to the even the grist is something that so many people play with and are experimenting with. And this is something that Henry, the owner of Monkish, him and his spouse, they both own Monkish, and they talk a lot about this, that it's a lot about experimentation. It's a lot about hop combinations. It's a lot about playing with different malts. They've talked about playing with crystal malts or flaked versions of Golden Promise, or, and just always trying to. And I think that's actually very interesting because if anybody who knows the story about Monkish is that they originally were going to just be a Belgian beer, forward brewery, but it feels like when you hear them talk about brewing hazy IPA, it's with like the Belgian lambic, like blending spirit. Like what
Yeah.
because he's like we've tried just Vic Secret, but like when you get to us over a certain amount, it's too much. These two together are great. These two are good, but only if this one's the dominant one. Like he's doing his own blending. He's just
Hmm.
not doing it with barrels. Like he's just got bags of hops, and they're just doing it in either test batches or or just experimenting and figuring it out along the way while they're doing these releases. But I kind of feel like it's got this Belgian spirit to it.
Yeah, I can see that. It's just kind of like the philosophy behind blending applied to hoppy recipes. He's not probably
Yeah.
not blending stock per se, but it's all about kind of like finding the overlapping tones of flavor and aroma that you want to incorporate in there. And then, when we're talking about ingredients that are geared and processes that are geared towards unlocking certain compounds, then there's also the really technical side to it, which you have to have sort of a vision of what you want the flavor to become, and then you have to have the technical know-how to be able to to bring it to fruition.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of in general, hazy IPA, you're going to be looking at things like Pilsner, two row, things like that for base malt. The other thing, some breweries will play around with Vienna malt, either a higher percentage or just a touch of it. A lot of folks, the theory is that it kind of gives it that kind of golden hue that you see in beers like this. Also, the lighter color is through use of things like wheat or oats, things that are extremely low in color, maybe even unmalted. Um, I know some places even use just like for head retention, they'll just use like raw barley or chit, or or what's called chit malt. That's a little bit under modified. So there's lots of these really really pale malts that are being exposed, but a lot of them you hear like, oh, is it 10%? Is it, it's a relatively high percent, it's kind of seen as a relatively high percentage, but then there are other places. I remember I was watching a course on craft beer brewing by Alvarado Street, and they shared their recipe for their beer that's called Contains No Juice, and it's a hazy. And the only thing that they have as an adjunct is something called, I think it's Simpson's Crystal Light, and it's like, I think it's like 2%. It's like 4 ounces of it in like in like a 12-pound. They're doing like a homebrew recipe for you, and it's so, and even then, and you look at it, and it's just hazy as all get out. Like it's not, because a lot of people think, oh, it's the proteins, it's this, it's that. Like apparently, there's other things that are that are going on that we're learning about haze still, which is another thing that the omega yeast just came out recently, and they figured out they've isolated a gene for yeast that promote haze formation, and they've aptly called it HZY1. And now I'm sure on all of their strains, it's gonna be part of the profile. There's gonna be flocculation, alcohol tolerance, pH tolerance, and then is it haze haze positive or haze negative, or however they're gonna market that. But there's a lot going on. Like it's more than just like you're just trying to make something that's not clear and skipping clarification methods and just dry hopping the crap out of it. There's a lot of nuance and a lot of artistry to this. So
Yeah,
that's
and I can get burned out on hazy IPA as much as the next person, but I think there's this kind of like conventional wisdom that it's lazy or it means one thing, and I just don't understand that perspective. It is there seem to be thousands of ways to tinker with introducing elements of sweetness that don't amp up the color. There is also these brewers in particular, like all the hype hazy brewers, are beholden to certain aesthetic conditions that, like, if
it
your
is
beer is just a shade too murky or a shade too dark, that's like a pretty fickle customer that's dealing with some of the most traded types of hazy IPA. And so you have all of these like aesthetic concerns that you just can't set aside. And so I think it's like, it's pretty tough. I just don't understand the idea that it's an easy thing to do, or that it's a cop out of some kind.
right. Exactly. Yeah, and then another kind of interesting technique that I think a lot of people think is relatively new, and it and I think it kind of is, or at least it's become really popular. It's become really, sort of well adopted across the industry, is because you want all of these thiol precursors to be exposed to yeast during fermentation. It's, one of the common practices has become fermenting during or dry hopping during active fermentation. And I remember I was at the craft brewers retreat, and someone was asking about that during one of the IPA panels, and they said, I remember in 2010 or 2012 or whatever, when I realized this was just like the brand new thing, and Ken Grossman like stood up and was like, when we were trying to figure out how to put whole cone pellets in fresh hops in celebration, we could not figure out any other way to get it in there without letting oxygen in, except doing like active fermentation, dry hopping essentially. So he's like, this has been going on for like 30 plus years. Like, this is not a new thing, and which is pretty much what he did all week. Was just like everybody had an idea, and he was like, we've been doing that forever. Like Sierra
Yeah,
Nevada's just
I love
first.
that. What's old is new again, or what you think
Yep.
is kind of revolutionary is really not. And it's that's not to dog on the process or anything. That's just to recognize that a lot of
Right.
these techniques have been used for a long time, and contemporary brewers are just using their version of those techniques to create a new style profile, basically.
Yeah.
Which is super fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's and then the last thing for recipe that when I was listening to Henry talk about conditioning these, again, kind of going back to the like old like trope that these were rushed beers. He said he has waited as long as 32 days in like a chilled bright tank before releasing these, because he was just waiting for it to be ready. And then of course, then after that point, you have to ask the question once you're. I mean, because those are really cold temperatures for 4+ weeks. That's. I mean, is this a lager? Are we? Of course,
Oh,
I'm
the
kidding. I'm
original
I'm
hazy
totally kidding.
lager.
I don't think we can go that far, but it's you're starting to get into that kind of territory, right? When you're conditioning something at low temperatures for over 4 weeks, you're starting to call into question.
You know, yeah, it's I have complicated feelings on that. So, it's
Yeah,
maybe best for another episode.
but also just a great, I think, just a great example of you just have to do what you got to do to get the right finished beer. Like even if it's not traditional or what maybe one would consider like the treatment for an ale, it's not just like, well, like we gave it 2 weeks and so that's when an ale is done conditioning. Like that's when it's all done. Henry's just like, if there's not enough like yeast out of suspension and like hop matter, like we're just he's like, we're just not gonna we're just not gonna release it. And so that's I think that is something to be celebrated in our brewers that do those things.
Yeah, and you can tell in the product that it's well crafted, and I think you also have to be careful when brewing hazy IPA and things with all these other both flavor compounds, but dry hopping during fermentation and all that stuff, that you're almost like re-kickstarting a lot of problematic things that could happen in your
Uh,
brew. And
Absolutely.
so, the dreaded hop creep, that brewers have mostly seemed to figure out, which is where there's some enzymatic activity after you dry hop in active fermentation that almost recreates parts of the fermentation cycle, or restarts them and produces diacetyl again.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing diacetyl rest, or forced VDK tests multiple times to make sure that you're past the point where those flavors are going to come out, then and those just take time. That necessitates time, right? So
Yep.
if you're pumping out a hazy IPA that's triple dry hopped in 12 days, I mean, a week into packaging, that thing's going to be a butter bomb. So there is patience involved, despite people thinking that some of these are rushed to market.
Oh yeah, and there's so many brewers that are trying to figure out how to include ingredients or techniques where they can mitigate that just by 3 or 4 days. Especially bigger
Right.
brewers. I know this is something that at the Craft Brewers Retreat, Vinny was talking a lot about. They were just getting it where it was like, we're waiting for diacetyl, and he's like, every day that goes by, and so it was like the difference between, again, if it was, let's say it was something like 32 days, like he was trying to get it down to 25, so that it was ready to go to market. And when you get as big as them, that's 7 days is a lot of money and tank space, and
Right.
there's consequences. So yeah, no, absolutely agree. So now on to our favorite part, the food pairing part. And I think the first thing to kind of get out in the open here is, we've mentioned a lot, for anybody who's followed us when we were doing our show on Instagram Live, and now have kind of moved here, is that there are certain styles where when you say this certain food goes well with this style, it's very important to say like which particular commercial example you are talking about. We talk a lot about that with a lot of Belgian beers like triple and double and things where there is a lot of variation, and because there are a lot of hop flavor variations, and like you said, there's bitterness differences, body. Some hazy, if they're in kind of the milkshake, IPA area where there's lactose and vanilla, then that's a whole, different profile. Some people add fruit to these kinds of things. So just saying something goes well with hazy IPA is something to I would caution people against.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there are some general principles or things that you could look for opportunities for pairing with hazy IPA. But when it comes down to it, you're going to have to deal with the specific beer that you're drinking, and you got to do that for a variety of reasons. One is, a lot of hazy IPA producers, breweries that are known for it, they rotate recipes so quickly that you're not going to see that same beer again for several months or a year. And then those breweries, kind of like the smaller craft breweries that are, for lack of better phraseology, are, the most highly traded ones. They
Mm-hmm.
have a different approach to hazy IPA than the big craft breweries that are looking to make something hazy IPA, but that's a little bit more shelf stable, that's kind of a little bit more mass appeal. Um, And so, pairing Sierra Nevada hazy little thing with food versus pairing this beer with food, I think is like basically two different discussions, even though there are some very light parameters that you could look for that could help. And one of the main ones that I think you agree with me on that's a big opportunity for hazy IPA is for savory pairings to look for opportunities for the beer to be the fruit on your pizza or the jam
Mhm.
on your burger.
Yep.
Something that is, you've got kind of a little bit of a rich meal, but it can be, the pineapple on your Hawaiian style pizza. It would pair nicely with Hawaiian style pizza, honestly, but
Right.
you could also just have like a pepperoni pizza and let, the fruit character really be the contrast
Mhm.
point to all of that, like salty, um, meaty and cheesy quality. And in that vein, I thought that one of my first ideas was on. I had two main kind of savory ideas, and one was, um, how you do like you might do like a bacon jam on a burger.
Mhm. Yeah.
You could just have kind of a nice juicy burger with bacon and forego the jam and let this kind of be almost your like apricot preserve or your ring of tinned pineapple that's on the burger. And what's difficult about this beer too is the higher alcohol, so you got to be careful about some other things. You need the intensity of your dish to be pretty high for this one, I think. Um, because where like some really light
Beep, beep.
aromas of passion fruit and pineapple might go well with a salad, this beer is going to bowl over a light salad. So that's, you got to make your salad a little bit heartier if you're going to go that route. But I digress. The second thing that I thought might be really, really cool is, and I've mentioned this in our previous shows over on Instagram, is like a sticky barbecue sauce type of ribs. And, I'm vegetarian, I go the fake rib route, but I think the real key is kind of that like spicy, sticky, almost like all those barbecue sauces that kind of become a glaze or whatever have a big element of sweetness to them. And you can have this be the kind of fruit infused version of that. I think that orange, that grapefruit, that pineapple and passion fruit are going to be, they're going to just find a really nice home on a sticky barbecue glaze.
Yeah, it's definitely good to remember that fruit it can actually, like you said, can actually kind of just take on things, like grill marks, whenever a lot of people just will grill pineapple. I personally, love to do like grilled peaches. So, when you have fruity, when you have fruity beer or a smoked beer and fruit, those, smoke and grill marks and those sorts of things like fruit can actually, like you said, kind of play along really well. And you called it right away. I literally have on my paper, like, if this thing smells like pineapple, like this is going with pizza. Because for someone like me, the pineapple issue is literally just textural. Like
Mm-hmm.
warm pineapple, that's just like cold pineapple, great, where it's just got a little bit more of that, kind of firmness to it. But when it's just kind of like, don't know about pineapple melting in your mouth when it's hot. It's just kind of
Understood.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if there's anybody out there that's like that, that's why I enjoy it. And then I also made a list, just in case. I kind of looked and tried to do some research of other hops that people really find are very pineapple forward, just to kind of give people, a leg up if they're at a, tons of breweries have pizza, as, one of the things that they serve. And so it's like, if they see, a hazy IPA with some of these, maybe it's something that they can maybe lean into with a little bit more confidence. And the ones that really kept coming up, well, one of them, Simcoe, was number one. So
Mm-hmm.
that might be where we're getting that from. Eclipse, Azaka, Brew One, and then one that a lot of people will be able to find is Mosaic.
I was
A
gonna
lot
say
of
I
it's,
get big pineapple from Mosaic for me. I
yeah,
have
for me it's,
more difficulty with the berry note, but
yeah, no, it's
um,
pineapple and peach for, and a lot of white peach for me from Mosaic. But then I kind of I thought, pizza was, like, obviously you called it out, so obviously it was one that, I thought we were going to definitely, either one or both of us were going to bring up. But another thing that I had tried recently at an Italian restaurant, and didn't realize was kind of like a sort of classic pairing, was kind of like a cantaloupe wrapped or prosciutto wrapped around cantaloupe. And
mm,
I had never had that before, and I had it, and I was like, this is like, I thought about that today, and I was like, oh my gosh, like hazy IPA prosciutto. how do we work in cheese? So then it's just like, okay, we just have a giant, ball of burrata, and we sprinkle some really nice olive oil over it, a little black pepper, put some, I like to fry up the prosciutto, make some little crispy bits of prosciutto. Even if now that I think about it, even if you want to play into that sort of smoke element, you can use speck. That's kind of like really close to prosciutto, but just has a little bit of that hint of smoke to it. I actually think that might be, even a little bit better. And then again, depending on where the beer falls on the sweetness spectrum, if you need to maybe meet a little bit more of that sweetness, you could go with something like a pomegranate molasses, kind of like a fruited, kind of sweeter thing. Or if you were kind of just trying to lean into something that's just not too sweet, but is still going to be bright and kind of, match the beer that way, you could even just go with lemon zest or a squeeze of lemon juice to just even intensify the lemon-like acidity that you might get from something that's, so young and fresh, like a burrata.
Yeah. Another kind of lightly outside of the box idea that I had, and I haven't tested this, so I don't know if it would work, but it sounds really nice, is elote, Mexican street corn. Get some grilled corn on the kebab, essentially, and not on the kebab, corn on the cob, and you've got the kind of like a aioli, aioli type of sauce that it's drizzled on it, and some queso fresco, and a little bit of kind of spicy chili flake. And I thought that the element that we're kind of creating there is like a lot of people like, especially like Mexican style candies are like fruit flavored with the tahine, with the kind of like lightly spicy, savory chili powder on them. So I think you'd be playing into that element a little bit. And then with grilled corn, just like the sweetness of the corn. And like you said, it goes with grill marks, and it's kind of the same corollary as grilling fruit in terms of like how it might interact with this. So that was one that I haven't tried, but I thought that could be really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for contrast, you're really looking for, like we've said, deeply savory, which also leads me to like ropa vieja, which is just like really, really long, slow-cooked pork. We just had Kahlua pork recently, and I think this would be awesome with something like Kahlua pork. There's just a lot of really good contrast that's going on, and there's just a lot of brightness with something that's, with something that's just really, really deeply savory. I think working from there is going to develop a good contrast, and then maybe kind of figuring out some bridges for that. Did you land anywhere for dessert?
Yeah, I actually thought my first thought was kind of a light canvas dessert. Well, not that light, because you need some intensity, but let me cut to the chase. What about ice cream cake, but not chocolate, vanilla cake? And you got some, even just as simple as vanilla bean ice cream as part of the ice cream cake. And so it sounds like you're working with something kind of simple, but that extremely cold, dense vanilla character almost turns this into milkshake IPA territory when you're combining them. And this beer, as I taste it, that was kind of an idea I had before I tasted it, but I think would provide a little bit of the like lemon zest or like orange zest or grapefruit zest character to really lighten that up, to where it's almost like I would be shooting for an orange creamsicle kind of combination there.
Yep.
And so that was my first idea, and I was hesitant that the ice cream cake is not light. That can be a pretty dense dessert. So I think in terms of just the intensity, it's fine, but it is a little potentially one note. So I think we're really transforming it by bringing an extremely fruity beer into the fold.
Yeah, I went kind of in the same route. I was thinking something like, what's a good base to kind of bridge with that's kind of sweeter, and so kind of just adding in something, a fruit element that maybe isn't there, rather than going with matching, especially since desserts a lot of the times, they can just be kind of like one fruit note. I decided kind of starting with a base of like panna cotta. And then if there's something that I would say maybe that I'd want to add in here, maybe there's a place across the street that makes a great mango panna cotta. But then I kind of wanted to play on the milkshake IPA thing, and I thought if there was some vanilla bean infusion, you could maybe even do some sort of infused whipped cream. Make sure to have a little sprig of mint on there, to kind of add a little bit more complexity, add some brightness, to kind of meet the brightness of the beer. And I think that would work with a lot of different, a lot of different elements. I think if you're going with a beer, you're going to get a lot of Citra, in a lot of hazy IPAs. And so for me, that's just there's a lot of lime in something like that. And so going with this like lime, mango, mint, I think the whipped cream really helps, because when you have fruit notes like this in any sort of beer, dairy is just always going to be a win. So if in any way that you can, because you can see, I mean, a lot of my suggestions are pretty much like cheese or dairy, or have a dairy component to it, and that's because it's just one of my favorite interactions in beer. So it's hard for me to get away from it. But that's something I'd say to look out for too.
Yeah, I had the thought that the beer itself drinks kind of like a sorbet. It's got this little bit prickly carbonation, this light bitterness. Mine was a little bit cold, which helps the sensation as well. But it might be good with a bright sorbet, like a lemon or a lime type sorbet, where that kind of more acidic fruit character is really a flavor booster for the more tropical aromas that were in here.
Yeah, this is definitely one to play with dessert, because for a long time it was just a lot of people you had West Coast and it was super bitter, and a lot of people just kind of leaned into carrot cake. But this just leaves you with like so many more potential options, that to me this is one of the more fun styles to be experimenting with when it comes to pairing. And I'm excited. I've got another can of this in the fridge, so I'm hoping to, and I've got some Kahlua pork, some leftovers, and so that's definitely going to happen. Hoping to put out some content related to how that pairing goes.
Yeah, and I think too that a lot of a lot of American cooking specifically, except in the summer, kind of forgets about the fruit, in your cooking and in your dishes. And a lot of global cuisine, especially in really warm climates, uses, you know, tropical fruit in their savory cooking a lot more frequently. So I'd be interested in folks, after you listen to this and maybe try some things, if you are a little more worldly than us, like what kind of ideas you have for, I think this would pair really well with a lot of, kind of like tropical cuisine. So
Absolutely.
just a
No,
thought.
I am right there with you. Um, so for our next episode, we decided we wanted to give people a little bit more time to know like what beers we're going to be doing. So if you're wanting to watch the episode right away and taste the beer right along with us as it's happening, the next beer that we're going to be doing is I should have looked up how to pronounce this, but I think it's Schleicherle Weichel, but it's their root beer. It's the newest one that they did. It's their root beer that has cherrywood smoked malt as opposed to beechwood. Hopefully you're starting to find it. Thankfully, Chris found a bunch of us for our group and was able to hook us up with those. But I know if you're on the East Coast, I've been jealous of all of your pictures for the last month that you're just getting them all in cans and bottles. And so hopefully it's kind of making its way over and you're able to track that down. But that's the beer we'll be doing next week, and we're really excited about that one because we both had it, I think, a couple of times, and so we're pumped to go through it.
Yeah, we're really threading a needle here. We started in our migration over to YouTube with, Fruit Lambic and Hazy IPA, and now we're like narrowing in on the three of us that really like smoked beer. So I would also really, really enjoy it if you're not the biggest smoked beer fan in the world, to go grab it and enjoy with us and see if you can find something that you like about it. So yeah, go seek that one out. It's Schlenkerla's first cherry wood smoked beer.
Yeah. And then obviously make sure to like the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're at the Beer Enthusiasts on Instagram. Chris is the Fresh Beer Enthusiast. I'm the Vintage Beer Enthusiast. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Chris, once again, tons of fun. Cheers, everybody. And I'm hoping that we will have lots of you tuning in next time and watching our video on smoke beer.
Cheers, my friends.
Cheers.